Good day, everyone across North America. This is John Garmendi with Sony's Professional Solutions of America, welcoming you to another in our series of Tech Tuesday AV Solutions webinars. These webinars were started in response to the COVID crisis so that our customers, resellers, integrators, and consultants can stay informed and up to date on Sony's latest products and solutions. Today's webinar is part of the application and technology focus series we started during the month of August. This week, we'll be providing an overview of a new firmware release for several of our BRC and SRG-X series of PTZ cameras. We'll also provide demonstrations of a few of the new features enabled by this firmware update. Before we start, a few items of housekeeping. As in previous webinars, there'll be an opportunity for Q&A, so please submit your questions via the GoToMeeting question panel. I'll post links to information referred to during the webinar in the chat panel, and I'll also post a link to our YouTube playlist where you can view all of our archived Tech Tuesday webinars. Joining me today will be Drew Buttress, Senior Product Manager for our network cameras, and Kiana Pumpa, Sales Support Engineer. So I'll turn it over to Drew and Kiana now and join you all back here for Q&A.
Thank you, John. As John mentioned, we're talking about a new firmware upgrade called version 2.1. This was released on August 31st, and it specifically affects the BRC X1000, BRC H800, both in their white and black versions, as well as the BRC SRG-X Series PTZ cameras. Some of the cool things that happen with this firmware upgrade is we're adding color bars to the BRC X1000 and H800. We're also adding what's called 3D support to the BRC X1000, H800, and X400. And I'll explain a bit in a couple of slides regarding what the 3D protocol is. Also, we've added a new PTZ speed mode for improved control, especially while on air. We've also improved how focus works on our preset recall. And finally, a new way to actually control the slope PT mode for the BRC and SRG-X Series cameras. So with that, I will jump in. So first, color bars. Color bars were supported on our previous, or I should say our older BRC models. For whatever reason, they were not added in at the initial release of the BRC X1000 and H800. So we've added them now, and it's the same kind of full field bars that you see on the BRC X400. Now the BRC X400 does have a bar title, a little window where you can put the name or number of that camera. The BRC X1000 and H800 do not have that title bar. The benefit to your customer is the color bars can be used under the same workflows and conditions as other professional cameras. The nice thing about this is you can bring up the color bars with a button press from either the RMI P500 or from one of our RCP or MSU color control units. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kiana. Kiana?
Hello everyone, I am reporting to you live from my home office with the BRC X1000 and the RMI P500. To highlight on what Drew just presented, I will be showcasing how you can press the bars button on the RMI P500. This is what you'll get when you enable the bars button. This is with the bars disabled, enabled again, and disabled. It's just that easy. Back to you, Drew.
Thank you, Kiana. So I mentioned the 3D protocol, and what that really is camera tracking data, and it's used with virtual reality and augmented reality, like basically virtual studios. What's happening is we're sending real-time tracking data using this 3D protocol. So it's not VSCA, it's not S700 protocol over IP. It is its own protocol that has pretty much become the standard for this VR, AR, or virtual studio type of work. And what happens is the camera's sending over positional data, which includes pan, tilt, zoom, focus, and iris, directly from the camera into that graphic engine. The value add to your customer is they can configure an AR, VR production system without having to use an additional tracking system. What is a virtual studio? Well, we've all seen green screen work, but virtual studios are becoming more popular. And what happens is your talent would be standing in space with a full, complete green background. And then by bringing in that tracking data, we're able to position them relative to the lens. And that allows that person to say, walk backwards. And on this graphic, this virtual set, they're then able to show that depth as they move. So it's really becoming a pretty big trend. It's very popular in Europe right now. It's becoming more popular here in the States and in North America. And we're seeing that popularity grow primarily because of what's happened with COVID-19, that you're able to create a stage, a natural looking stage, even if you're remote and you're trying to keep the talent socially distanced. So as you can see, we're taking the camera feed and compositing with that computer graphics and synchronizing with the movement of the camera. So in a traditional system, you would have a manned camera on a tripod with a special type of floating head that would provide the position of the camera, in other words, the pan and tilt information, and then coming from the lens, you would be getting the zoom, the focus, and the iris. That all goes into this external tracking system. Everything is tied together with Genlock or an external sync. That tracking data then feeds the graphics engine, which then does the composited video output. With our system, we've simplified it by the BRCs sending that tracking data directly to the graphics engine. It removes that requirement for the additional tracking system. So again, what's being sent is the pan, tilt, zoom, focus, and iris positioning. It is sent over IP using the UDP protocol only. We're not supporting RS-422. Again, the protocol is 3D, which has really become the industry standard for sending camera positional data. There is a limit of one client connected to the camera. And again, the more important thing, or the most important thing, is that this tracking data is output in sync with your Genlock timing. So Genlock is a hard requirement for one of these systems to work. So an example of a system diagram for you: the sync generator is sending the Genlock signal to the camera. Camera's video is being fed into the workstation, and then across the network, we're sending the pan, tilt, zoom, focus, and iris information frame by frame that's in sync with that Genlock signal. But because it's network, you can also connect your RMIP500 or RMIP10 PTZ controller, as well as an RCP or MSU 1500 or higher. And the advantage of that is because the PTZ controller is using VISCA over IP, and the RCP and MSU are using S700 protocol over IP. Everything is networked, and you're able to do everything simultaneously, even though you're still sending that tracking data. So these are 4 vendors we're currently working with. We will be posting, as we get certified, we will be posting on our compatibility table that can be found on our website, and we'll continue to update that as these integrators, these vendors give us our certification, as well as any new partners that we're working with. So another new feature I mentioned is a new pan, tilt, and zoom mode. This one is really kind of cool, because a lot of people who want to do an on-air slow creep zoom or a real slow reframing of the shot sometimes feel like our speeds are too fast, even when you dial them down to their slowest speed using the RMIP500. So what we've done is we've created what's called extended range mode. And in extended range mode, your minimum pan speed drops to 0.05 degrees per second. More importantly, is the minimum zoom speed drops to 1 millimeter per second. To give you an idea of what that changes from before, to go from full wide to full tele, even at the slowest zoom setting, it would take about 20 seconds. Now to go from full wide to full tele, it will take 300 seconds or more. And by way of a comparison, you can see one of our competitors' models is their minimum pan tilt speed is listed at 0.08. So again, for the technical director that wants to have a very slow crawl zoom, or if the talent has moved slightly and you want to reframe and move the camera almost imperceptible to the viewer, this extended range mode would certainly be a benefit to those applications. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kiana to show us this live. Kiana?
Thanks, Drew. So we're live again here with the BRC-X1000. As you can see, we can showcase this in intervals. So this is the fastest pan, as well as the fastest zoom that the motor provides. But we're going to showcase that new 2.1 implementation. So before this implementation, the slowest speed that you would get is this for zoom at the slowest, and then this for pan at the slowest. Now with that new 2.1 firmware update, we're going to showcase how to enable it. You first have to enter the camera menu. Under System, you have to turn on the extended range on both zoom and PTZ type. Extended range should be both on. Now that they're enabled, go back. And now you'll see the difference. So this is the super slowest possible setting with that 2.10 firmware update, as well as the slowest zoom setting with the update. And now back to you, Drew.
So moving on, the last upgrade to the BRC-X1000 and H800 is improved focus control. So when we introduced these two models a few 2 or 3 years ago, we introduced the concept of semi-synchronous movement on preset recall. And by that, our older BRC models would do a preset recall in a 2-step move. So we would first pan tilt and then we would zoom. So when we introduced these models, we had all 3 motors starting at the same time. However, we would not adjust focus until the camera became stable. So in other words, we would move the camera, all 3 motors, pan, tilt, zoom. So a single move to get to the preset that's being recalled, and then we would do focus. What we have done now is we're going to move the focus while we're moving the camera. And if you have saved the preset with a very slow speed, what you're going to be able to do is achieve you can achieve an on-air move by doing a preset recall. So with that, Kiana, let's go back and we'll see how this looks live.
Okay, perfect. So we're back here, BRC-X1000 live view. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to recall a couple of presets so that you could see how fast the focus is with this new improved update. So this is my first preset. It's going to our beamforming microphone, and as you can see, focus is already running. So when you stop at that preset, your image is already focused. And now we'll move to preset 3. And it's that fast. So one more time. And then I'll move back to you, Drew.
Thank you, Kiana. So as we said, there is a version 2.1 available for the BRC-X400, SRG-X400, and SRG-X120. And you'll see the first thing we did is we've added the 3D support to the BRC-X400, as has been mentioned. And you'll also notice that it's not, we didn't bring it over to the SRG models, and that's because the X400 and X120 do not support Genlock. And as I previously said, Genlock is kind of a hard requirement to make that work properly. The other improvement we've done is for all 3 of the new X-Series PTZ cameras is we've now enabled the ability to control the camera when in slow pan tilt mode using your IR remote or through the web UI. So we'll start with the 3D, and there's some differences here, and I need to bring them to your attention. The first is that the pan tilt motors in the BRC-X400 they don't have the same fine granularity that we have in the X1000 and H800. So the tracking data is a little more coarse, or the accuracy of the tracking data, I should say, is a bit more coarse. As well, the output tracking data has a latency of a frame, and that's because we're buffering in the camera. And because this is an IP streaming camera, we have some other requirements. I didn't bring this up because the BRC X1000 and H800 are not IP streaming cameras, but the BRC X400 is. And what happens is the output tracking data could become unstable if you've got streaming enabled. So we have some recommendations from our engineers. The first would be not to use RTSP streaming when you're doing a shoot with the 3D protocol running. The other is because there are 3 possible streaming outputs, you can turn off codecs 2 and 3, and then codec 1, which end users cannot turn off, we highly recommend you set the frame rate down below 5 frames per second, and then also not to use the web UI. Again, we have the same 4 vendors we're working with, but there is a chance some of them will not certify the camera just because of the quality level of the tracking data for the reasons I just mentioned. But as we get certification from those who will certify us, those will go up on the website, as well as any new partners that we get certified with. And finally, enabling slow PT mode. Again, you can go into this on-screen displays and turn slow pan tilt mode on. And once you've done that, you're then able to control using their IR remote or the web UI. The reason why these didn't work before is the IR remote is using the SRG-X protocol and the web UI is using a CGI protocol. So we've now included support for both of those and making it easier to put the camera into slow pan tilt mode and then controlling it with either of those 2 interfaces. And of course, it still works using an RMIP10 or RMIP500. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to John. John, questions and answers.
Thanks, Drew and Kiana. We do have some questions. First question is from Rudy. Looking to understand if this firmware upgrade can be done by an end user, or do the cameras need to be sent into a service center?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Yeah, Rudy, the answer is no, you do not need to send this to a service center. You can actually perform the upgrade yourself. Yeah, you would be able to download the version 2.1 firmware and then perform the upgrade through a network interface to a between a camera and a laptop or PC.
Thanks, Drew. And I did, just so everyone knows, I did place in the chat the links to download the version 2.1 software for both camera series. So it's in the main chat. Question from Callie asking what application would require color bars?
Well, that's a great question. So what I have seen is a lot of broadcast studios will repurpose the studio for multiple shows, whether it's the morning news, afternoon news, evening news, whatever. And they may have a different number of cameras on, well, they'll have a fixed number of cameras on the set, but for any given shoot, they may only use a fraction of those cameras. And so what'll happen is if a camera is not going to be used in this particular shoot, they'll turn on the color bars. And what happens is the video switcher operator will know that camera is offline. And so won't accidentally hit the button to cut in that camera, which would obviously be just the color bar. So it's typically used that way. Another way is when you're integrating a studio or upgrading a studio and you start doing the camera install, they like to turn on color bars to ensure they've got signal integrity from the camera all the way to the switcher.
Thanks, Drew. Question from Felipe. Will this upgrade apply to the SRG-X 400?
Yeah, the answer is yes, but But the upgrade for that is just to be able to do, you're not going to be able to do 3D. Obviously, there's no gen lock. So you're really, what you're getting is the ability to control the camera in slow pan tilt mode with either the IR remote or the web UI, the web interface.
Thanks, Drew. Question from Derek. Does extended range mode affect preset recall speed? He asks because at further distances, a fast move can be disorienting.
Correct. So to be honest, the way we just did the demo, the presets had been saved in normal mode, and the camera was still in extended range mode. And so when Kiana did the preset recalls, you saw the camera moving at its higher speed. I couldn't answer if I haven't tested it myself personally because it's fairly new, but I haven't tested saving a preset with extended range mode on, and we'll do that and get back to you with an answer. I do know you've got the ability, if you're using the RMI P500, you have the ability to actually set the preset speed, and you can dial it. I mean, 24 is the fastest, 1 is the slowest. So depending on the look that you want on the shot, you can go save a preset with that speed, and then on recall, you'll move the camera at that very slow speed.
Great. Another question from Derek. Will the firmware update affect third-party control VSCA over IP?
It shouldn't, because we didn't change any commands. What would happen is you bring up the menus to turn on extended range mode, and that's, if a third-party controller can bring up the menus, then you can get in there and turn that on. I honestly don't think 3D would be affected by a third-party controller because it's not the VSCA over IP protocol.
Question from Ralph. He asks, how fast can it go in extended mode? So Drew, I guess he's asking about the top speed in extended mode.
I'm sorry, I lost audio for a second there. I'm going to have to get back with an answer on that. I mean, what we're highlighting is the minimum speed.
Okay, very good. Ralph, we have your email address and we'll get back to you with a more detailed answer. Question from John. He asks about the ramp into and out of the zoom. So he says here, his main interest is not the overall zoom speed, but the ramp into and out of the zoom.
Sure. Okay, well, it's different on the two different BRC families. The BRC X1000 and H800 have 3 different ramp modes. Ramp mode 1 would be aggressive. Ramp mode 2 is what I would call normal. And then ramp mode 3 is actually gentle. So it's a soft start and a soft stop if you're on ramp mode 3. On the BRC X400, we really only support 1 ramp mode, and that's ramp mode 1. I don't think it's that aggressive, but without a reference to a ramp mode 2 or 3, it's hard to say. I don't think it's bad at all when I operate a BRC X400.
Okay, question from Connor. He asks, will this upgrade apply to the BRC H900?
No, it does not.
Okay. And just looking through all of the questions here. I know John had a follow-up question on ramp speed. Told him that we'd get back to him. We get back to him for more in-depth discussion. I'll give a minute or two for any other questions. I don't see any incoming questions, any further questions incoming. Okay, so I guess with that, we will thank everyone for their time. As always, we appreciate your attendance on these webinars, and many of them at this point are in direct response to your requests topics that you'd like to see, and we'd like to continue to do so. So at the end of this webinar, there'll be a short, just a very short survey. We'd ask that you all please provide us your feedback and your thoughts so that we can keep these relevant and continue to make them useful. With that, I'll say everyone have a great week, stay safe, and please join us next week where we'll go over some new features of our TEOS system, and that will be Tuesday, October 6th. So everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, and look forward to seeing you then.